All right, hey guys, this is Nowhere Man. I'm Jason, and I've got Kevin Delcrossby with me here. Say hi.
How's it going, everybody?
Hey, and we are here with episode 1 of PLO Ghost Ship. So the series is going to be pretty similar to the No Limit Hold'em Ghost Ship series that was with it was Blue Whale and JK3A, right?
Yes. So the big difference is going to be a substantial lack of talent between the two series.
Entirely possible. And we're playing a different game, but maybe with between the
Well, if
two
we're
extra
if
cards
we're
we've
half
got.
as talented, but we have twice as many cards.
I was thinking that in that case it'll come out in the wash and everyone will still enjoy it.
Right.
That's the goal at least.
All right.
So half as much talent but twice as many cards. That'll be our mantra for the series.
Sounds good.
So what we've got here for episode number 1, I played 4 tables of PLO. I've got 3 tables of 50-cent dollar, and the bottom right-hand table is a 1-2 table. So we're going to watch me kick some ass, hopefully. And Kevin and I are going to just grill each other about stuff, talk about what-if scenarios, all kinds of good stuff like that. And hopefully you guys get a lot out of it. So I will hit the play button, and we'll see what's going on.
Do you want to just run through your HUD real quick?
Yeah, actually. Let's see if I remember it. I barely used it because I just installed Windows 7 on my computer, so I hardly even had Hold'em Manager up and running. We've got VPIP and PFR, the first two. I don't actually know what that third number is. The fourth number is 3-bet percentage. And then the only number I know on the bottom row is the left one, which is aggression factor. And I hate that number anyway, so I don't even use it. I probably held the mouse, the tooltip up to see any particular stats that I needed, but honestly, over the sample size that I've got, the only ones that are really important probably are like VPIP and PFR, so
Okay.
just roll with those two for now, and if we need anything else, hopefully we can figure it out.
We'll post in the thread what the stats are in case anyone cares.
Yeah, once I figure it out. All right. So hey, check it out! I flopped a set already.
Yeah, no, I like how the video starts before there's any action and you flopped a set. So
That's right. I managed to wait until something awesome happened and then hit play.
Good stuff. So, do you notice any difference between 50 cent a dollar and 1-2?
The biggest difference that I noticed was just that there's even more shallow tables as you move up. I didn't find a ton of difference in the play. I think there's a few more like loose passive people and stuff. I mean, the one table sample size that I had for today, there were a bunch of nits that decided to play 1-2, except for the subterfuge guy who is pretty much as non-nitty as you can get. But yeah, the big thing that I noticed wasn't as much player types, because honestly, there's a lot of people that played both limits.
Sure.
That I noticed. So I think the issue is game selection. I know when I played this session at maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time, and there were like 4 non-shallow games running at 1-2, and like 5 non-shallow games running at 50-cent dollar.
Okay.
So getting yourself onto a table, I think, is a tough task, and it seems to me like that tended to merge the player bases a little bit.
Okay.
But other than that, I think there are probably some better people that will play exclusively 1-2, but I didn't notice a huge difference and haven't recently.
Fair enough.
So go ahead and play all the limits at once, everybody, is the moral of that story.
Got it.
Just kidding. All right, so going back into the games.
So you're folding 3, 5, 6, 7 in the small blind. Do you think that's a little tight, or?
Yeah, it probably is. I am super, super nitty in the small blind when it's folded to me. Was there a raise in front, or was it just?
No, it was folded around to you.
Yeah, that was dumb. I should have raised that.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know enough about that guy to fold that. I think if there's like any reasonable action in front of me, I'm okay folding that hand because my cards are low, and when I flop like a straight or a wrap, either no one's going to have anything or they're going to have a ton of equity against me, and I'm out of position, so that's going to suck.
Right.
But folded to me, there's absolutely no reason why I shouldn't be
Yeah,
raising it.
especially when you're only 100 big blinds deep. If I were substantially deep and I had an aggressive player in the big blind, those are the hands that I'm going to start to lay down, just because he's going to put
Yeah.
me in some tough spots where I mean, a hand like that is usually going to flop something that will probably have reverse implied odds. Like, you're probably going to be flopping the bottom end of straight draws and stuff. So if I'm deep with someone and I'm concerned about, like, if I were like 200 big blinds deep or so, or like at a deep ante table, that's the kind of hand that I'm going to start giving up. But in general, I'm 100 big blinds deep. I thought that was pretty tight. So I'm glad to hear you agree.
I would agree. There's probably a bunch of stuff I did in here that was just me not paying attention because I was trying, or not paying attention well enough because I really wanted to focus, because I'm on camera and all.
Right. Yeah.
So one thing that I'll ask you about, since I did it throughout the entire session, I made my raises a little smaller on the button. I did 3x instead of 3.5. What do you think of that?
I kind of size it based on what players are in the blinds.
Sure.
The looser they are, the more inclined I'm going to be to three bet, or to make my open raise to 3.5, or to full pot or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I expect them to call, and so my adjustment to that is going to be, I'm going to tighten up my button stealing range a little bit. Unless they're like very loose pre-flop, but then just check fold very often, which I mean,
we love those guys.
Yeah, I'm basically tailoring it to whatever I think would be most effective against whoever's in the blinds. If the guys are tighter and I want to open more, then I'll start making it 3x. But in general, I mean, it's sort of a minor point. In the deep ante tables, it becomes more of an issue. I think about it more. But
that was the next step I was going to get to, was that.
Yeah, in the deep ante tables, it's where that's where I start thinking about bet sizing a little bit more. But in this, when it's a difference of like half a blind, I don't think it matters that much.
Mm-hmm.
So. But in the deep ante tables, depending on then it just becomes an issue of stack size. If there's a 250 big blind or 200 big blind stack in the big blind or small blind, I tend to open a pot more often, because even if I get 3-bet, there's so much stack depth behind that I'm not, I'm basically, I'm still playing like a pretty reasonable sized pot, and I have position.
Right.
So I can make them make much bigger errors. So yeah, sort of my
cool.
My opus on opening sizes.
All sounds good to me. All right, so let's see. We get led into for pot on that top right-hand table, and I don't know. What are your thoughts here on this hand? I think here I don't really have much of a problem folding. I mean, yeah, I've got some backdoor draws, whatever.
Right.
Well, it's not a huge deal. Say I'm heads up though. Does that change your opinion any?
If it were heads up, the thing is, so we don't really know anything about this guy except that he's played 60% of his hands and hasn't raised pre-flop yet. So I expect him to be a little loose, but we're basically hoping to improve to either a backdoor flush draw or 2-pair. And in this particular case, like if I had like 3 cards over the 10, I'd definitely be peeling. But the times that if I like spike an 8, I'm not, like, I really don't know where I'm at, and I can easily be folding the best hand, or
putting your money in really bad.
Yeah, like the 8 does complete a lot of his straight draws. The fact that I have 2 backdoor flush draws makes it, very tempting, but I think that folding here is fine, especially once there's like another player who calls. But if the flop were like a 3-4-10 and we had like 4 ace queen 8, then I would be more inclined to peel. Just because like I don't, the 8 doesn't, or is less likely to complete his straight draws. Or it doesn't. It's possible that he'll have a hand like 10-8, but it's not too likely that he's going to be donking that. I would assume that his made hand donking range is going to include more hands like 10-5, which I am perfectly live against. So yeah, and being like, the only thing is though, I hate peeling with a hand that's just 2 backdoor flush draws and like maybe a 2-pair draw. Yeah. And then picking up my backdoor flush draw and then being like, oh, well, now I have to call the turn.
Right, yeah. You're sort of following, like, you make a marginal decision and then you end up having to follow it by putting like most of your stack in because you get priced in eventually.
Right. So, I mean, without any reads, I think it's an okay spot to fold. But once we have an idea of what this guy is doing more, I'm gonna adjust my play pretty quickly.
Yeah, and actually, I think you'll find out in the next like 10 or 15 hands
Y-
what his tendencies are.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, he does donk bet a lot,
Yes.
but we don't, like at this point we don't have that information, so that's fine. And there's another player in between, so.
Yeah. All right. So bottom left-hand table, I call with a really junky hand because I'm in big blind and I can't fold anything in the big blind to a small blind raise.
I agree.
Uh, that's pretty much all there is to it.
Yeah, I'm playing
if this hand was rainbow, I would fold, I guess.
I might not.
But even then, I wouldn't be happy about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, unless, especially against unknowns, until I realize that they are definitely opening their small blind with a tight range, then I'm gonna switch from defending like 80% of hands to maybe 50% of hands.
Yeah, it's not like I'm gonna turn into a nit or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's, your heads up in position where your range is super wide and like they're gonna have a ton of fun. Like, there's just so many ways that you can harass people like this that I cannot pass up most spots where like the small blind opens into me.
Yeah,
And I probably 3-bet the top like 30% of my range if I think he's opening wide. So.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good strategy. I mean, it's on the order of 3-betting in position against people who raise from the cutoff or whatever, but I think you can go even wider just because of the way people end up playing the small blind.
Yeah. And it's a spot where it's somewhat of minor consequence, but the 3-bet ends up being smaller even if it's to pot. Like we're
Yes.
we're 3-betting, but there's still like even if we 3-bet pot, we're still leaving ourselves like a better SPR as compared to like if I 3-bet button versus cutoff.
Yeah, so because the blinds aren't in there.
Yeah, so we inflate the pot with positional advantage and still maintain like the bulk of our positional advantage. So it's it's a spot where you should be looking to like abusively raise people.
Yeah, and possibly something we'll talk about later in the series. It's somewhat akin to just raising less than pot in position.
Right.
You can sort of accomplish the same thing doing that.
Yeah.
So here, I mean, he checks. I bet. I think that's as standard as it could possibly be. I don't really see any reason to check it back here. I'm trying to think of what. Would you check back like, I don't know, say like 9, 10, XX with no spades?
It depends. I'd have to. I mean, in a vacuum, probably. Just because I expect to get, in all honesty, I think that it's a little suspicious that he like checks this board.
Yeah, I did too immediately.
An ace high boards are so, I almost wanted to, without knowing anything about this guy, it's sort of a weird spot because it's like, it is such a quintessential c-betting board and his stats seem very reasonable. He seems like a taggy player.
Yeah.
So when he checks, I actually think that he has showdown value here a lot. And so I'm not, I'm kind of, I would almost like to like check it back and try and hit a gutter or even just represent spades if they came in. Because if I had weak spades, I think I would check them back as well. And then
yeah, I think that's the other type of hand I might check back.
Yeah. So, I mean, but given like our specific hand, I think that betting is probably fine. We can also pick up a backdoor gut shot, which is, I mean, it's not of too much consequence, but still, it's worth noting. I somewhat expect him to have like maybe a one pair type hand here that has decent showdown value. So
yeah, maybe a one pair hand that has some little extra piece, or maybe like some tiny, like a bare tiny flush draw or something like that. I can also see him playing this way.
Yeah, I mean, if he had like top pair and a gut shot, I think that would be like a pretty reasonable hand for him to show up with. That he's gonna check call here.
Yeah.
So, but I think that if he also is checking the flop with, some of his like maybe his like king high flush draws, his queen high flush draws, then it becomes, it puts us in sort of a weird spot, as to whether or not we want to barrel or what. So.
Right. And he, fortunately, almost doesn't give us the option of doing that. I think top left table folded that 3-bet pretty standard there. I'm never calling with that hand, even though I'm in position.
What was the specific hand there?
I'd like ace, jack, 8, deuce suited to the 8 or something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's fine.
It was bad, like no worthless hand to call 3-bet with.
Right.
I call a lot there in position, but that hand not so much. So he leads here on the turn. What do you? I mean, I basically was like, he's got a flush here a ton. I don't really know what else he would necessarily want to donk with on the turn.
I mean
Uh,
a bluff. Like
I mean,
if he had like the naked ace of spades and check called the flop because he has showdown value with top pair and then decided that he was gonna try and pot like just kind of cover his bases.
yeah,
But I just I mean it's sort of a weird line. I mean if he has like a low or medium flush then fine. But I don't know. I can't. It doesn't. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I couldn't think of a lot of hands that made a lot of logical sense for him to check call the flop and then lead the turn here, other than a flush.
right.
Unless he was like floating us out of position with the intention of betting like this particular turn. Because I guess my problem was if he's going to do this as a float, okay, but what is he doing on like the other 34 cards in the deck on the turn?
Right.
That aren't spades.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird to think of a hand that would just be floating here, but I mean, I could reasonably see some showdownable hands that maybe he's deciding to turn into a bluff. Just because, and then betting once and then just absolutely giving up.
Yeah.
Rather than, so if he had like a Jack 8 type hand here, rather than check calling another bet or like if the turn goes check check and then check calling a river, he just decides he's gonna bet out himself and see where we're at. People, I don't know. I mean, people do weird things for weird reasons. So
Yeah.
but yeah,
Well, maybe he does have some two-pair hand, because then at least if we call, he has like some equity on the river.
exactly. If you're gonna like sort of like bluff at a board like this, it makes a lot of sense to do it with a two-pair hand. That way you have equity, you have equity versus our calling range like a ton because we're like if we call here, we're usually gonna have like a flush of some sort, and then at least it's like you're trying to hit like your 4 outer, so
Yeah.
it's somewhat reasonable, and you probably have some implied odds there, especially if we have like the nut flush.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, our range is super wide here, so I'm not sure as to the profitability of his play.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, I think it took us that long to explain how we think this would be a good idea, so
Right.
that might not necessarily be the best advertisement for it.
Yeah.
But all that being said, I have a double gutter, and I'm just going to fold.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we've only managed to get through 2 minutes of video in 20 minutes of discussion, guys, but I hope that it's mind expanding. This is what I think about when I'm usually playing a session. It just happens a lot faster.
Yeah. All right, so ace 10 5 deuce. Pretty sure I can fold that one in the small blind.
Yeah, I'm stealing from the small blind, not much. It's just I mean for the same reasons that I defend my big blind so lightly, I am
Exactly.
very rarely trying to steal from the small blind against any sort of non-nit player.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Trumpy Ghost guy turns out to be not a nitty player.
Right.
All right, so I think we're going to get to play our first pot on that bottom right-hand table, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, this was fun. So I'm pretty sure I bet here.
Yep.
And I just kind of feel like, Harry Potter has any 4 remotely reasonable cards here. Subterfuge is playing 90% of his hand, so he has any 4 cards. I'm just going to take a stab at this one time. If everybody folds, great. If anybody calls, I'm done. Like piece of cake. That's it. Easy game.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fine. I sometimes like doing it with like a little bit of equity, but even if I had like a gut shot or something, it makes it more fun for me. But it doesn't even matter because if we get called, like there's reverse, like anytime you get like if you bet out with like say Queen Jack 10, which would be like the best draw we could have, you have like pretty big reverse implied odds on actually making your hand since all of those cards connect with the hands that they're going to be playing. That
he has trips. Right.
So like if you're gonna try and steal that pot, it doesn't really matter what your hand is, and sometimes it might even make sense to just do it with a hand that has no equity.
So you'll notice on the top right-hand table, I picked up on the fact that this guy had donked pot like 3 times in 5 or 6 hands.
Hmm.
There's not really anything I can do on that board. If I had like the full double or the huge gut shot, whatever, I don't know how you want to call it, like, I think the flop is like Queen Jack 6. If I had, the 4, 5, 7, 8 hand or something like that, maybe knowing more a little more about him, I could conceive having a call there. Because then I've got, like, what is it, like 18 outs to a wrap on the turn.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
other than that,
if you're gonna be making calls with like very weak hands like that, like you should basically be picking the part of your range where like there's a ton of cards on the turn that like have good visibility. And
yeah,
like you're not, in the same way that like because like if you pick up like your like one of those cards, now your equity is gonna jump to like between 35 and 40% very often.
right.
As compared to like making light peels with hands that are like marginally strong, and then like you're going to have like when you pick up equity, you're going to sort of sigh and put in more money and be really unhappy about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I sometimes I mean, it's especially out of position. I know you were in position there, but when you are out of position, that's an even bigger factor is having like a polarized
Yes.
turn equity.
Absolutely. Yeah. So on the top left-hand table, I checked in the big blind and flopped bottom two. So this is a pretty draw-heavy board. I decided just to lead here. I certainly don't want to check call because I'm gonna have no idea what to do on like any turn that doesn't give me a boat, or I guess a diamond. I don't really want to check raise because that's going to blow up the pot in a scenario where, I mean, I feel basically the same, and I certainly don't want to get it in with my bottom two plus backdoor draws against anybody. So I just bet, and if somebody raises, I think, given my hand, it's a fairly easy fold.
Right.
Sound pretty good?
Yeah. It's sort of funny because like our hand like when we lead with a hand like this, like we're basically just trying to fold someone off of like a lone 8 or something. Like we're never
Yes.
getting like a hand that is like much better than ours. Like we're not really getting a queen to fold, but and like we're not really getting value there either. So it's sort of a weird spot, and I think that it forces us to fire 2 barrels.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, if somebody called, I would almost certainly fire the turn.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, and like given that we can pick up diamonds, I think that's fine. But if we had like a dry bottom 2 here, I think I would just be check folding,
Yeah, I agree.
especially in a limped pot.
Yeah, and the more multi-way this gets, the more inclined I am to just pitch it immediately.
Yeah, like when you are 3 ways, I think that you generate more fold equity. In the sense that like, if the guy in the middle has like like a lot of times, like if the guy in the middle had a hand that he would call heads up, he's gonna have to fold it.
Right, he has a tougher decision to make in that one particular spot, for sure.
But given that he's a half stack, I think it's less likely to be a factor for him.
Because he's not paying attention to these sorts of things.
Probably not. So, I mean, that said, I'd still rather like lead a hand with like, at least like some sort of showdown value and a backdoor draw that I can bet again. I might, there's some cards that I'd want to check fold on. Like, I think I'd be check folding jacks, obviously clubs.
Yeah.
Some of the, there's a lot, it's like the most draw heavy board ever though, so there's reasonable bluffing potential.
Oh, this is a fun hand. So top left-hand table, super standard pre-flop play. Bet the flop, no big deal. Turn, I guess, is where things get a little more fun.
Yeah, no, this one surprised me.
So I decided to break out the old triple barrel here. Basically, I figured, I guess I'll talk about it ahead of time and watch it in action. My thought process here was basically that the best hand he can have on the flop is like ace XXX. I think he check raises his 2 pair hands. I think he check raises a straight. And there's not really, I mean, other than like a 6-4 type hand, there's not much else he can have here. So I figure I'll bet the turn, and if he doesn't stick it in on the turn, then I'm totally convinced on my read that he has a 1-pair hand with an ace at best. Because I don't think he's calling with 6-4 on the turn. and all the other hands are like snap getting it in.
Right.
So when the 7 comes in on the river, now I know he has one pair, and since I have, king high, I better stick it in and get him to fold his ace. So
So,
that's what.
so just out of curiosity, if you had ace king here, would you ever bet 2 or possibly 3 streets for value?
Um,
Because given your given your read
against
of the
this guy,
situation, I think that
yeah,
betting ace king for value twice is a really good play.
yeah, I think against this guy, I probably would. Yeah, I totally because I mean, I really thought this guy was going to call here with any ace and side cards to try to hit 2 pair at some point.
Okay.
So yeah, I totally agree with you that and ace king, ace 3, any of that stuff is totally
Well,
worth 2 street value.
Ace 3 is
I
not.
get well, ace 3 not anymore. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm just
hopefully
thinking
hit
like
a bigger side
I
card.
think that when people have like top pair and like on a paired board, they misvalue the times that they have like their opponents outkicked.
Right.
And
Hmm.
I think that that's like this is a great board to go for like a very thin value bet on the turn. And it really widens our range if people see that we're capable of that, of like
Yeah.
value
Then
owning them, then like they can't peel with just they can't peel with any ace if we're gonna bet ace king for value. It becomes a nightmare.
yeah. Or they either go that way or they're just like, well, I'll call everything.
Right, which is great because then we go back to value betting the crap out of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, find
Yes.
spots to
So
value bet thin is the
there you go. Yeah. So don't mind what I actually did because I just stuck the rest in and
I think that's fine.
yeah.
I mean, given that we would also probably stick it in with trips against this guy, given how passively he played it,
Oh yeah.
or any boat for sure. Um,
Yes.
you know, and I think you're right that 4-6 is already gone. So unless he's like doing some weird slow play with 2-5 or 2-4, I think we're fine.
Yeah. Or he really thought that his ace was good.
Right.
There was still that possibility.
Yeah, I mean that would have been a pretty sick call with ace king.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
we get three
top right
bet
table.
small, and I
Yeah.
think
Not
that's
folding.
no, no. I don't. I mean, even if he has like aces here, I think we're still priced in because he's giving us ridiculous odds.
Yeah. And we know the other guy who's out of position against us is for sure going to call.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned that you weren't happy with opening these jacks
Yeah.
on the cutoff. And the reason for that being, of course, that the jacks are weak and the stacks behind you are not, like you're not going to get much value the times that you flop
Right.
a jack, and the rest of the time we basically have to check fold.
Yeah. Yeah. If the button is a nit, I think this is fine, but given that he's playing, half his hands or more, I'm just not really going to get a lot out of this. And I think if the button is a good player, I mean, regardless of him being like tight or loose or whatever, I am less of a fan of this particular open.
Right. Given that no one wants to 3-bet behind you, and like they seem to be very like these aren't people who are making your life at all difficult. I can't see the stack size of G Money. Does he have $65?
Yes.
Okay. If you were to pick like one of those like really super exploitable spots to just like open limp or min raise,
Yeah.
this is a pretty reasonable spot to do it in because no one is ever going to notice what you're doing. Like
Mm-mm.
these guys will never see what you're doing. So,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so if people are looking for extra spots to do weird things that you might not ever do again, this would be a good spot for that.
right.
So top right-hand table, this might be, I mean, I saw this, this guy checks pretty standard, pre-flop 3-better checks. I put him on aces like, I don't know, not every time, but a lot.
Yeah.
And I thought if I take a stab here, I might get him to fold some of the time. In hindsight, I'm not the biggest fan of it because I think there's just too much stuff on this flop that somebody can call with, and I have no equity whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think if I had like anything to go with my hand, like if I had a gutter or something,
I mean,
know,
all we have is
I'd be more
yeah, I
with
mean,
it.
we have a backdoor flush draw, and
Yeah.
like it's a spot where like if we turn a pair, like like we have like a very few gin cards that we can hit, but if we hit like say
Yeah.
the five of hearts, the 10 of hearts, a king,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden like our hand looks good enough that we can
value bet again.
Well, like we can try and get to showdown maybe, and
Yeah.
given that this guy 3-bets so small though, I actually think it's somewhat less likely that he has aces.
So you're putting him more on a rundown type hand?
I'm putting him on something weird for sure.
Okay.
But I'm not like, given how draw heavy the board is, and we have like a cold caller in the blind, like we're 3 ways. I think that the 6-8 just hits too much of their like random like crap range that they're gonna have like a pair and like maybe a gut shot or a pair and a flush draw that I just want to check it back. And if I hit an ace or a king, I'm probably gonna call a bet on the turn and see what they do on the river. When they check the flop like this, I don't expect them to decide that like because they're gonna like hero 2-barrel and like try and get us off of something. So I think that we can call the turn and then fold the river. If we picked up like some sort of decent card. That said, we create an enormous pot.
Yeah, they both like snap call.
Turn the ace high flush draw.
Yeah. And then this guy pots into us, and I'm like, oh, come on.
That was sort of the other consideration, is that we know that this guy's like a donk bet fiend. Like,
I think that's actually part of what made me lead the flop, because I was like, he didn't donk the flop. Maybe he doesn't have anything this time.
Yeah, it makes it a little better. But like that said, I think that we like if we really wanted to like break down and like analyze the crap out of this player, I think that the board textures that he was like donking were typically not ones with flush draws. I'm not entirely sure, but if I had to speculate, I don't know if we get a hand to showdown with this guy, but I think that he's probably donking big with like straight draws on like, and maybe like weird 2-pair hands, or at least most of the boards that he's been donking have been connected and typically without a flush draw.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's correct.
So,
I wanted to talk about this bottom right-hand table real quick. So I raise under the gun, whatever.
So you
get a couple of calls.
Is what you say that you want to like bet when you have like the stones with a redraw? Because I don't. That's a pretty straightforward hand, I thought.
The bottom right-hand table?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the bottom left.
Yeah. No.
Flop
that one's pretty.
Yeah,
that one's easy. No, the bottom right-hand table. So I check the flop because I can't. Of course, I check the flop.
Yep.
But I turn to pair and it gets checked to me again. Am I crazy? As soon as I hit the check button, I was like, I kind of wanted to bet the turn. But I'm still kind of torn on it.
I think that, I don't think that we're going to get any better hand to fold for sure. And I think that we're going to get, I think that any hand that peels us will be doing so with probably damn close to proper equity. Because, I think that the only, it's just unlikely that, there's going to be that many hands that are a straight naked flush draw or a naked straight draw.
Right, yeah, everyone's got a pair if they've got anything else to go.
I think that given that we can't fold out anything better, we can't fold out, a better 2-pair, and when we get called, people aren't making a mistake by calling us. I think that checking is fine.
Yeah, I also think that it's going to be really difficult for me to play, 90% of the river cards.
Yeah.
If someone bets into me or anything like that, regardless of what I do here. So all I really end up doing by betting is maybe getting someone with, an 8 to fold and bloating the pot to make my life more difficult on the river.
Right. I mean, the thing is, if you get the thing is, I almost feel like if we get called on the river, and it comes anything, we're somewhat I would almost feel like I would have to bet again as a bluff on a non.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then I would probably rather do it with a hand that had more. I'd rather do it with some sort of drawy hand that has less value now. Less but as soon as we bet, if we get called, we're all of a sudden being crushed
now
by their ranges.
Right, yeah, and that was the other thought that had occurred to me was do I really want to have to bet again? And I really didn't want to bet again, so
right.
I just checked back.
On this river, if we bet and get called, then on this river, I think that we should be betting, just because it's we our hand is so weak, and even a random King 3 now beats us. Like there's just
Right. Yeah.
it's not a
So
good
let's go rep Queen 10.
right. I mean, like if we wanted to comfortably rep Queen 10, that's fine. But with two flush draws out there, like half the card is no longer or like half the deck is no longer a brick, and it
Yeah.
becomes really awkward for us to try and play. So and it's so I would expect to get called in a couple spots in all honesty because we're four ways and there's two flush
Oh
draws.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. There, I just mentioned that I thought I was thinking about betting the turn, but I didn't.
Right.
So let's play the lead. Oh, I didn't. Oh, come on. No, I think checking. I don't know. I could lead this flop. I think I know why I checked this flop actually on the bottom right hand table. That I had seen that subterfuge guy like limp call a bunch of times and not fold the flop. So I figured here with like just a gutter, forget it. I won't bother this time.
If I had the ace of clubs, like just the naked ace of clubs, I'd go ahead and do it.
Yeah,
then,
I think that's a better way. Then I can like double or triple barrel if I need to, depending on the turn river card.
right, and it really constricts their range to like medium strength made hands. Like they're peeling you. Like if you bet out and you know that they can't have the nut flush draw, then they have they for sure have just like a queen and some kickers.
Yeah, and I think that's that's actually a pretty good point for people to think about with in terms of what you can do with the nut blocker. Like I think most of the time, anyone sees, oh sweet, I have the nut flush blocker. Like, did you want to talk about that other hand?
Yeah, that hand on the top right.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead and finish your.
We'll get to it in a second. Most people just think, oh sweet, now I can like rep the nut flush. But there's so much more to it than that, because like you said, you having the nut blocker means that other people can't have the nut flush draw, which means their hand range is now totally different than what it would be if you didn't have that card. So there's more ways of exploiting having the nut flush draw blocker than by just, knowing that people can't have the nut flush.
Yeah.
I guess it's just a slightly different way of looking at it, but it's still pretty useful.
Yeah.
So what did you want to say about that top right hand table?
So we bet the flop. Can we go back to that hand or no?
I don't think I can actually bring it back.
I just think that the river call it's a spot. I mean, like, it's a spot where you're against a passive guy who and like it looks like you're checking to check call.
Yeah.
And when that is the case, I think that it makes it more of a check fold. When people I think that people are mostly expecting a call there, and he value bets. Okay, so we can at least see what the board was.
Yeah.
So when we check, it lets him value bet us pretty thin if he check back most of his misses, because I just don't think that it's a spot where he's going to try and turn a hand into a bluff. You
don't think he turns a flush draw into a bluff there?
An ace. The thing is, what is he gonna have there? Like the king high flush draw and nothing to go with it. Because if he has king jack queen, then we're boned.
I mean, do you think he checks back I don't know, a 9 with hearts?
I don't know. I mean, I just don't know how many of those hands get to the river. It seems like that most of them are gonna have a little more going for them by the turn. I mean,
but he plays every hand.
Yeah.
So his range is any 4 on the pre-flop at least.
True. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess. I mean, it's close. I don't know. I feel like our bluff catcher I mean, I don't know. This is a spot where when people check to me, I value bet ace 8. So
yeah, well,
I mean, I know
right,
this guy isn't thinking that, but I think that this guy is probably just when someone's playing every hand, sort of the assumption that I am more willing to make is that when they get to the river with little to no showdown value, they're just gonna say oh, I missed. I hope that my one pair is good. I don't think that he's gonna try and make us fold 2 pair or something very often. I think that requires some thought as to what our cards are. And
oh, absolutely.
And so I think that he is more likely to just be oh, well, this guy missed his flush draw, so let me just check and see if my 1 pair is good or something.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more in terms of his most likely hand for calling the flop is an 8, he has an ace, a 9, or hearts, and by the time we get to the river, he checks back all of his ace hands, And if he has just a 9, he may take a stab at it some of the time, and if he has a flush draw, he's probably going to bet that. So
Yeah.
the problem, I think, though, is that the 8 and the 10 coming on the turn in the river give his random flush draw hands enough other stuff that he probably checks a lot of that back.
Right. And as it were,
I think,
he made like two pretty loose, some optimistic peels, and then gets there.
that's kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess the moral of this story would be if the turn and river are like, I don't know, like a 4 and a 7 or something like that, I think the river call might be a little better, because then it's tougher for him to have some like weirdo 2-pair straight type hand that gets there.
Yeah.
With the hands that he, can peel the flop with.
If you really think that he's only peeling with like very weak like draws, which is probably going to be like a large portion of this player's range, it's not terrible to try and check raise a weak hand on the turn like that and just make him be just like force him to like
put a lot of money in.
Put a lot of money in, because if he has a draw and we check to him, I expect him to bet. But given how weak our actual hand is, like it's just top and bottom, and even some of his like random flush draws have us like dominated, like he can he can have ace 9 or ace 8 there, and I guess we put those hands in sort of weird spots. But I think he's not gonna.
He ain't folding.
He's not folding. So if we had a little more equity, I think it'd be fine. But
yeah. And there we go. I was trying to figure out what he did on the turn. But he has a gutter, so, in PLO, if you improve, you can't fold the next street. That's kind of the law.
Yeah. Because he would be able to play that gutter so well on the river.
Yeah.
When it comes like the 7 of clubs or hearts. Or, I'm sorry, 7 of hearts.
I say he did do pretty well.
Yeah,
he got a value bet out of me.
I mean, like, he hit like one of like 2. Well, I guess, he did value bet like, I don't know. I think that a lot of players are checking back there, like with a straight for some reason.
I was pretty surprised that he had a straight. Honestly, I figured he had a flush there every time if I was beat.
Right? Yeah. No, I agree. This is a super loose defense, by the way, of the 3-bet with King Jack 8.
Yeah, I agree.
I
have no defense.
Yeah, against like a total unknown, I'm not thrilled with it. But especially since it's a much larger 3-bet, because we 4x it and then they pot it.
If there's a limper, yeah, that's the other thing.
So yeah, it's I guess if you have no defense, then we can just move on and say that it's probably not a good play.
Yeah, I would probably fold this,
especially against someone that you have zero history with. Like we don't know what their 3-betting range is at all, and this is probably
double suited. I'm probably okay with this, but this hand.
Yeah, even so, it's pretty junky. It's pretty junky.
It's a junky hand. I was trying to isolate the 85-5 guy.
Yeah, no, for sure. The 85-5 guy who also has close to 300 big blinds in front of him.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Spoiler alert: it doesn't last.
Yeah. I missed the hands where he blasts through it, but I'll have to get there.
So ace high board, he pots into me. So let's talk about this particular spot a little bit. What's your game plan here on these ace high boards against guys that you don't really know very well? Are you generally just starting off being like, yeah, whatever, it's the blinds. You've got a lot of, maybe not even necessarily ace XX hands, but a lot of ace XXX hands in your range. So forget it. I'll just move on to the next hand.
It depends. There's some times when I might, I don't know. I think they're going to have aces there a lot. And it depends on what my particular hand is.
Yeah.
And, what, certainly the stack depth, I think that generally speaking, it's probably prudent to fold unless we had some sort of combo draw here, or obviously 2-5. If we, clearly we're calling some 3-bets pretty spuriously, so we could potentially show up with 2-5, I guess. But on an ace high board, with a player that I have just no history with at all, I'm going to give them credit for a high carded hand that hits this board more often than it doesn't, and just give up. Until I've seen them do otherwise. Typically I assume that people have aces until they prove otherwise.
I think that's a pretty solid assumption for most people, especially from the blinds.
Yeah. So.
All right, that hand out of the way.
So what was funny to me was that you raised that really junky hand, but then you have these double suited jacks, and I assumed that you were going to raise them to isolate the limper again, but then you just flat call with them.
Well, there's another limper in between, so I figured my thought process on the other hand was I'm on the button, I can probably get the hand heads up just against that guy. Here, I know if I raise, there is like 0 chance I'm going to have a heads up pot. And I don't know, with jacks, like, yeah, they're double suited, but when am I going to flop a real big monster hand? I'd rather just kind of limp it behind because I'm going to see a limp pot here for sure. And then let's try to flop set that way.
Right. See, my thought in a situation like this with like double suited jacks are, I think, a tricky hand for a lot of people. And my thought is in this spot, I would want to raise for 2 reasons. First of all, the second limper is not that deep. So I'm not concerned about if I have to play a big pot against that guy, it's not going to be the end of the world if I get it in with like some sort of weird combo draw and he has like a better heart draw because he just doesn't have that much stack depth. Now, everyone else behind me, however, does have a big stack. Now, I'm not at all concerned about Subterfuge because he's clearly just playing like any 4 cards. And I think
he's the guy I want to play with anyway.
Right, and I don't think that he's folding. So I would want to raise here to hopefully knock out the button and the 2 blinds and clean up my flush draw outs and make me feel and like, be able to like have a better chance of playing a pot with just the fish and a short stack. And I have position, I mean like playing against a short stack, I don't even care. But, having position on the fish with like good stack depth behind is something I'd much prefer that than to just limp along because I think it's going to be more difficult to get the fish's money in a situation where he sees a 4 or 5 way pot or a 6 way pot. And like, I don't think that he's going to be putting in money as bad. So I'd rather get more of his money in pre-flop and then hopefully convince him to do something dumb than to try to get him to, or than to like try and build a big pot from nothing.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I think the other point in your favor is probably that, well, I don't know anything about Japanese mind, but the 2 blinds are huge nits.
Right.
So I will be able to clean up those guys 95% of the time with a raise here.
Right.
Because they are quite nitty.
Yeah.
As we find out later.
Well,
there's one hand.
We've got like 60 hands and 30 hands on them. It's pretty... It's like, I mean, it's not a great sample size, but it's something.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one hand in particular that I don't think we'll get to see in this particular episode that's really, I thought was quite funny.
So on the top left, if I were to pick like a hand to just sort of like airball bluff with, like having like 2 kings and the king of spades is...
I really thought about it. I
know it's 5 ways, but I think that just makes it look stronger.
Yeah, I really thought about it.
I mean, because the thing is, like, when you get peeled in a spot like this, like, if you're just doing it, if I just had, like, 2 red kings there, then I don't know if someone is peeling me with a flush draw or like, some sort of
like 2 pair
and what I'm going to be able to barrel them off of. But in this spot, I feel like and, like, 5 ways, I think you're going to get respect.
I have King Jack here when I bet this flop.
Right, like I think that this is like the perfect storm of things to like for me to want to bet with like a naked gut shot. And if we get raised, it's not a big deal, but I think that there's a decent amount of coin in the pot to just try and pick up right away.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so I don't know. It certainly takes some stones, and I don't fault you for checking. But I was like, oh man, this is a great spot to try at least and see what these guys do. So anyway.
So here's a fun spot here on the bottom right hand table.
Oh yeah, no, I will tell. So let's let this hand play out because I absolutely called his hand on the river before I've already watched this video. Guys at home, I'm not precognition, but I called this guy's hand like way before it was rolled, and I was just like, oh, I am so good at this. So he puts in a small raise on the flop on a very coordinated board. We have top set.
Yeah. That's just me marking that guy down as a nit. Don't worry.
Ah, okay. Is that what yellow means?
Yeah,
They're a coward.
I'll have to pick a new color for that.
Right. All right. So the queen comes. The queen changes nothing. I mean, it puts up a backdoor flush draw, but we're not too
No big
concerned
deal.
about that. Yeah, that's not a big deal. And he checks. What
Yeah,
hand can he
so
possibly have that he was raising the flop with that checks? We have 2 jacks in our hand. So, and he checks. So, I mean, it makes the likelihood of a hand like 9-10 much less. He's probably just going to
right.
bet. Or, I mean, if he got really tricky and decided to check raise the turn, good for him.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. We bet and he calls. The ace of spades comes. So now he couldn't have like raised the flop with the nut flush draw. He doesn't have 9-10 here like ever. But he had enough of a hand that he wanted to raise the flop with. We have 2 jacks. What hands could he have? I immediately was like, this guy has pocket 7s or pocket 8s. And if Jason makes like an ultra thin value bet against this guy's clear middle set or bottom set, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I thought about it for like maybe half a second, but I guess I was I think because I'm pretty sure I like time down here.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I was just like, wow, like the guy has to have a set to play his hand like this for that river card to peel off.
Right. Yes.
Like
because if it's any other river card, he can have maybe like 2 pair and the nut flush draw or something like that, but not anymore.
Yeah. So this was just like a really, I was just
there it is.
Just like, oh man, like, yeah. So
then I chicken out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I don't know that he would call.
Right, that's the other part about it, is like, even if I do completely, like, say I peg his hand 95% of the time, how often does he really call that river with pocket 7s or pocket 8s?
Yeah. But like, I don't know, that was just a fun hand.
Yeah.
If you can, like, when you can, like, narrow someone's range down like that based on card removal, like, even though, like, we couldn't, like, I think you're right, we can't really do anything with that information, because, like, the times that he has, like, pocket 7s, like, he might have, like, rivered, like, a 4 high flush or something.
Some weird flush, right, exactly.
And, like, not be folding it, so we can, like, I think we're value cutting ourselves more than we get value, and there they are, the set of 8s. It's a good lesson in hand reading.
Yeah. This hand on the bottom right-hand table completely blew me away, by the way.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled with your play.
Oh, I meant bottom right-hand table, sorry. The one that I'm not even in. Because the lead 3 bets in position and then bets this flop and gets check raised and folds, and I was like, you have aces here every single time, what's going on?
Yeah, but he must have had kings.
Yeah, I figured he wasn't capable of 3-betting
kings or something. So we bet and get check raised.
Yeah.
And then we turn a double gutter. So on this, like, we're sort of trying to figure out what his range is here. I think that, for check raising, like, he does check raise kind of small, which is very bizarre. It kind of looks like it could be a set a lot of the time. But I think that a bad player will be check raising ace 8 here a decent amount of time. And
that was a lot of what I put him on, was that kind of a hand.
Yeah,
ace 8, ace 5.
Yeah, and I think that the 2 pairs are much more likely. And we can potentially get him to fold ace 8 if we jam on the jack turn. Like, maybe not.
See, that's
what you were hoping to do, but
no. The way the hand plays out is basically I put him on 2 pair on the flop and assume I have 0 fold equity and play accordingly. That's kind of how I went through the rest of this hand, which is why the river play happens.
Right.
I figure he's 90-30. He's not going anywhere with top 2 or even like, middle 2 or something like that. Because I was tempted. You can see I immediately clicked the jam button, but I'm like, am I ever going to get him to fold? The thing here, though, is like, I mean, how much equity do I have against, ace 5 or ace 8? Like, I've got a double gutter plus the nut flush draw. Like, I've got, 35% equity probably. So I think given the way that he bet sized the flop and the turn, I think I should probably give it a shot.
The thing is, I don't even think that you, like, I mean, when he's sizing his bets like this, do you think that he can ever have a hand like 6-7 with like You know what I mean? Like 6-7, and he's sort of afraid of the flush draw.
Oh yeah, I think he can have like some one-way super weird draw hand. Yeah, yeah. Which is again why I think like I think if I were to play this hand again, I would just jam the turn because I can never. Then I'm never really making a huge mistake on the river. Because honestly, on the river card, like unless I get there, I don't know what to do.
Right.
Because at this point, I'm putting him like if the river is a brick, I don't think he ever folds two pair.
Right.
Whereas I think he might fold ace five or something like that now, and he can fold bad draws here, or he can call with a worse draw.
Right.
None of which he can do later on.
Yeah. It's a very weird spot. I mean, you certainly don't make a theory of poker mistake, but the thing is for me, like when the ace comes on the river and like all of a sudden like what the hell can he possibly have? Like it makes it much less likely that he has two pair unless he's decided that he's going to try and go for a river check raise.
Right.
But
yeah.
The thing is, I don't think
he can do that.
I don't think we need to bet much here to get him off of like. I mean, given that we have king high, I think that we can bet like $20.
Yeah, I should just once I get here, I should just bet half the pot or even a little bit less and try to get him to fold like an 8 or something like that. Yeah, I agree.
So.
But really, I should have just jammed the turn.
Right.
And I hem and haw and decide, I don't know if I can get him to fold an 8, and I check. And he has like a 5.
Yeah, I think like he completely like airball min check raises the flop, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, he had absolutely nothing.
Yeah, deuce 5. Deuce 5.
Nice hand.
Yeah, I mean he did own you.
Yeah. That's right. He value raised the flop for sure. So bottom left-hand table is kind of interesting. I call in the blinds. There were 3 people in the pot. I called with kings. I just check the flop and I check call the turn, and then the river comes and I'm checking. And against this guy, I might call the river. I can see him having random spades or 8-9 or something like that here. So I'm probably gonna call. But then he has aces, and I'm completely blown away that he didn't bet the flop.
in all honesty, on a board that dry, the big thing is the board was 6-6-2. Like he has ace 5-5, so he's not really worried about anything drawing out on him.
Although he's not really thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean he's not going to be able to get a lot of value. Like I don't think that there's any you might call like once with kings and then fold the turn, right? But I think that if he checks the flop, he can get 2 streets of value. Like he can bet the flop and bet the river, or bet the turn and bet the river. Or
in our shoes, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is it's a 2 street of value hand, and so
depending on how you do it.
Right. Like I would probably be inclined to check on a board that dry. I will probably check the flop, bet the turn, bet the river, trying to represent like a total bluff.
So what else? Okay, so my question there is, what airball hands are you checking that flop with? In position, heads up.
In position, heads up. Like, I'll actually check back like a lot of airball hands that are just like 4 overcards that reasonably stand to have good equity. It's unlikely that you have anything. And if the turn comes like a brick, I will delayed continuation bet ultra dry boards like that. Perhaps as often as I c-bet them. It depends on who the opponent is, for me. I think that delayed continuation betting against like someone who's just like straight up playing their cards is completely useless because just get them off their hand before they have anything. But if you have a hand that like reasonably stands to improve, like 4 cards above a 9 or something, where you can probably pick up the best hand on the turn if you hit. It's not a terrible spot to just go like check it back and then like probably react to a turn, because I do that about as often as I do with my overpairs, that I think I'm pretty balanced in the spot and you can't like try and blow me off of a hand. And on a board like 6-6-2, it's not even a terrible play to check back trips because they can't have anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had like some sort of like 5, especially if I have a hand that favors to connect with that board in like a meaningful way, like a 4, 5, 6x type hand.
Especially the times where they might actually have something that can catch up and get there,
Right.
And then you get a boat.
Right. Like that's the thing is if I'm in a spot where the cards that will make me a boat also are probably reverse implied odds and nightmares for them, I'm more inclined to check it back and represent thin value bets or like thin value bets or airball bets on like the turn, because I think that if a straight card comes in on the turn, they're going to call probably 2 big streets if I check the flop. So.
Yeah. Okay. I think the key there for all of our viewers at home is you can't just check that flop back with like aces and sixes.
Right.
You need to have other hands in your range if you're going to do that, and you need to have, a good reason for why you're doing that kind of thing. Because if you've only got big value hands there, then, like Sal 424 might not notice, but like the good players at the table might figure that out.
Right.
And I think at first, regardless of what you do that with, people are going to be suspicious if you check back a 6-6 deuce flop. So, just keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out your ranges for doing various things.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is because it looks so suspicious that I check back a 6-6-2 flop against like I guess a first or maybe a second level thinking player, I get more fold equity on my delayed continuation bets with like nothing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I think we're going to call it a session for today and possibly finish this video as part of episode 3 of the series.
2 of the series?
So, well, I don't know if we're going to alternate or we can finish this one and move on. I don't know.
True.
We'll figure it out.
Okay. Sounds good.
But either way, we're good for today. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the forums and we'll check them out and answer them as best we can. So for Go Shit PLO, this is Jason.
And Kevin.
So we'll see you guys later. Take it easy, guys.